It's Wednesday, the 30th of August, 2023. Welcome to the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed, where we give you the top 5 business stories you need to know in just 5 minutes. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Jennifer Duke.
Good morning, Michael.
Now, Jen, 5 stories in 5 minutes. We better get going. Story number 1, Reserve Bank Deputy Governor Michelle Bullock, who is soon to take on the top job at the RBA, gave a major speech in Canberra last night. And it's important because she was focused on central banks and climate change.
So the RBA is trying to understand how more frequent, severe and protracted weather events, as well as the global net zero transition, will affect financial stability. Michelle explained how they're grappling with figuring out the impact of climate change on the economy's capacity to produce goods and services, and then that affects monetary policy settings. This is incredibly complex for the RBA, and it's clear from her speech that they're investing heavily in research.
So what else kind of, this was a big speech. What else kind of stood out for you from it?
So there are a couple of interesting takeaways from this one. One is how the RBA is looking at productivity and the way that climate change might affect it. Now, we all know that sluggish productivity growth is a major policy challenge at the moment, and it looks like this is going to make it even tougher. So Michelle said that unemployment might be persistently higher if people are unable or unwilling to leave areas that are damaged by climate change, and those working outdoors may face more adverse health effects. Another interesting point to note is that we currently have a flexible inflation target, which means the RBA aims to keep inflation within the target range over time. The recent RBA review didn't recommend changing this target, but Michelle said in her speech that debate is going to continue on this issue due to climate change, and that's after research from the IMF a few months ago suggested that climate shocks might make this monetary policy paradigm far less effective.
Okay, on to story number 2 now. And Virgin Australia's CEO Jane Herdlicker reckons overseas airfares would have been 30 to 40% cheaper if Qatar Airways was allowed to schedule more flights in Australia. That is pretty extraordinary.
It really is. So the Virgin boss says that Qantas was the only party that objected to Qatar's bid to have more flights in Australia. And she's asked the government for meetings to discuss the decision. But so far, she hasn't heard back. She said she was pretty disappointed with Assistant Treasurer Stephen Jones for warning against driving down prices to unsustainable levels. And she said that every CEO in the country is likely annoyed that there's one company, Qantas, that the government thinks should be protected. Now, she's not the only one who's been pretty angry about this. Flight Centre Chief Executive Graham Turner has also demanded answers on who blocked the extra flights. And he told Sky News it was going to come back on the government badly.
Yeah, the heat does not seem to be going out of this story. It's been going for a few days now, and it just does not seem to be going away. So we'll be keeping an eye on it. Story number 3, Jen, embattled Star Entertainment Group has suffered a full year loss of $2.4 billion. That's $1 billion more than the market was expecting. Normalised net profit was $41.3 million.
Yeah, it was a bit of a blowout for the company, with $2.2 billion worth of value slashed from its Sydney, Gold Coast and Brisbane casinos as a non-cash impairment. Now, revenue increased 22% to $1.9 billion, and these results are 5 days later than had originally been planned because Star was finalising an impairment charge and sorting out the impacts of the New South Wales government's decision to delay casino tax increases. Star Entertainment has faced significant fights in New South Wales and Queensland to hold on to its casino licences, and there have been major inquiries, class actions and public hearings about the flouting of anti-money laundering rules over the past year.
I think it's interesting what CEO Robbie Cook had to say about the blowout yesterday.
So the Star CEO said that to describe 2023 as a challenging year understates the experiences for the business. And to quote him directly, he said, "The consequences flowing from the damage to our social license are felt daily by team members on multiple levels." But he also said that the business was now in a better position to weather the year ahead.
Okay, now story number 4. Jen, you would keep an eye on this in your day job as the economics correspondent for Capital Brief. Economic weakness is really hitting the jobs market. We've got the unemployment rate expected to hit 4.5% by mid-2024. This is according to a new report by Deloitte Access Economics. That is up fairly significantly from the current rate of 3.7%.
Yeah, so it's retail, utilities and construction that are likely to be the hardest hit by the employment downturn. In fact, almost 19,000 construction workers are expected to lose their jobs this financial year. Now, the report expects growth, though, in healthcare, education, accommodation and food services.
Okay, so there is a bit of growth predicted. Anywhere in particular?
So it is Canberra that's going to be the biggest growth market for jobs over the year on their report. Deloitte anticipates that nationally employment will grow by 1.4% in 23-24. That's about an extra 190,000 workers or so. And the year after, it will grow another 1%. But this marks a huge slowdown from the 4% growth experienced in the last financial year. And the federal government is expected to release an employment white paper in September, which will hopefully give us a clearer picture of the future of the labour market.
Okay, last one. Story number 5. Federal politicians are going to get their biggest pay rise in about a decade with a 4% increase.
Yeah, the Canberra bubble's getting richer. Backbenchers' base salaries are being increased to $225,000 and $680, up from $217,000. The Remuneration Tribunal said there have been conservative pay reviews in the past, and they needed to make sure that the salaries were high enough to attract and retain people of calibre. The rates are set below private sector rates on purpose to recognise the public service provided by office holders. Now, this actually puts the Prime Minister's salary at $586,000 or so, and the opposition leader at about $417,000. These base rates are stacked with a range of pretty generous allowances for MPs, including a travel allowance for every night they spend in Canberra, and that's almost $300 a night, even if they stay in a property that they own.
Yeah, that's not too bad at all. There we go. The top 5 business stories in 5 minutes. Thank you, Jen.
Thanks so much, Michael.
It's Wednesday, the 30th of August, 2023. Remember to hit follow on the podcast. If 5 minutes isn't enough, you can find our longer daily show called Fear and Greed Business News, wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget, every Wednesday, there's a new episode of How Do They Afford That, which is our sister podcast. Today's episode is an absolute cracker. It's all about frequent flyer points, how to use them to get free flights and business class upgrades and all of it. We answer all of your questions, everything you've ever wanted to know about frequent flyers. You can find that wherever you listen to podcasts, and I'll put a link in today's show notes too. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed. Have a great day.